Hey there, I'm Emma Clark. Born and raised in the small town of Harlow, nothing fancy, just a place where faces are familiar and secrets don't stay hidden for long. I made my way through college, diving straight into the world of retail after graduation. Lingerie wasn't just a product to me, it was a passion. I worked my tail off and eventually, I was the proud owner of a chain of lingerie stores that spanned from cozy little boutiques to swanky outlets. Work was my life, and I was good at it, damn good. But you know how it goes, after stacking up those hours, days, and months into a neat pile of success, I started feeling like there was something missing. That's when Michael came into the picture. It was just a ping on my phone at first, a friend request from a guy with a sharp suit and sharper eyes, judging from his profile picture. I didn't know him, but a quick peek through his profile showed a man who seemed to have it all together, a lawyer, which explained the fancy suit. Curiosity got the better of me, and I hit accept. It wasn't long before his first message popped up one evening while I was balancing my accounts. Michael. Hey Emma, thanks for accepting my request. Noticed we have a few friends in common. How's it going? Simple enough, right? But it was his follow-up messages that really got me. He was witty and had a way of making me laugh, even after a long day. I remember one night, we were chatting about something stupid, like the worst pickup lines we'd ever heard, and his humor just clicked with me. Michael, ever had this one? Are you a magician? Because whenever I look at you, everyone else disappears. Bet you heard that one in your line of work. Emma, oh, for sure, top of the cringe chart. My comeback? Are you a photographer? Because I really want to lead this shoot. He laughed, or at least, he typed out a laugh. Hard to tell, but it felt genuine. After a few weeks of chatting, he suggested meeting up in person. Just a casual coffee, to put a real face to the text, he said. It sounded good to me. The first time we met, it was at this little dive that I loved, because they didn't skimp on the caffeine. He was already there when I walked in, scanning a newspaper. He looked up, and that sharp-eyed, professional profile picture did him no justice. He was better in the flesh. Emma? Wow, you actually look like your pictures. That's a rarity in this city. Well, thanks. I think you're not so bad yourself, despite the lawyer vibe. He laughed, and that icebreaker just melted away any awkwardness. We talked for hours. It wasn't just fluff either. Michael had depth. He asked about my business, my dreams, and listened, really listened, to what I had to say. The thing about Michael is, he never did anything by halves. When we'd been seeing each other for a year, he decided it was time to take things to the next level. I was closing up shop one chilly evening when he showed up unannounced, his breath misting in the cold air as he held out a small, velvet box. Emma, I've been thinking, he started, and boy, did he look nervous. We've been doing great, you and me. I think it's time we thought about making this a permanent deal. I froze, the keys to the store still in my hand. Michael, are you saying what I think you're saying? He cracked a smile, that charming, lopsided grin that always made my heart skip. Yeah, I am. Marry me, Emma. Let's not play around anymore. I want you as my partner, for good. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. Marriage? Was I ready? But looking into his eyes, seeing the earnestness there, it felt right. Yes, I breathed out. Yes, I'll marry you. But then he shifted, his expression turning serious again. There's something else, though. We need to talk about some legal stuff. Prenup stuff. The word prenup hit me like a bucket of ice water. Prenup? Really, Michael? Is that necessary? He hurried to explain, holding my hands in his to stop them from trembling. Listen, it's not that I don't trust you, Emma. It's just practical, especially with me being a lawyer. I've seen too many messy splits not to be cautious. Plus, it's going to protect both of us. What kind of protection are we talking about here? I asked, my voice a mix of curiosity and concern. Michael pulled out some papers from his briefcase. It's straightforward. If either of us cheats, the cheater loses their assets to the other. Simple and fair. You know I wouldn't cheat on you, Emma. This is just a safety net. I took a deep breath, trying to process it all. The romantic proposal now tangled up with talk of cheating and assets. It wasn't how I pictured my engagement. But then, life with Michael wasn't ordinary, and maybe this was just another part of that. I looked down at the papers, then back at his face, reading the sincerity there. All right, I'll think about it. But let me be clear, Michael, I'm not planning to ever give you a reason to use this against me. That's all I'm asking for, he replied, relief washing over his face. We went out to celebrate that night, and despite the weird mix of emotions, the evening was perfect. The restaurant was cozy, the food delicious, and Michael was attentive, making me laugh and forget about the legalities for a few hours. Later, as we walked back to the car under the stars, Michael stopped and pulled me close. You know I love you, right? No piece of paper's gonna change that. I nodded, resting my head against his chest. I know, Michael. I love you too. Just, let's make sure this prenup thing doesn't mess us up, okay? He kissed the top of my head. It won't. Promise. And that was it. I signed the prenup a few days later, after reading it over with my own lawyer, just to be sure. It felt weird, signing a document that talked about the end of a marriage when ours hadn't even begun. But love's a gamble, and I was all in. I just hoped my bet on Michael was the right one. We were the couple everyone envied, always laughing and whispering to each other at parties. But a few months in, things started to change. It wasn't something I could put my finger on right away, just a chill that settled over us slowly. The real trouble started a few weeks later. We were out shopping, and I was looking for some new scents in a perfume shop. I chatted with the sales guy, just casual talk about fragrances. When we left the store, Michael was fuming. Who was that? He barked as soon as we were clear of the crowded mall. I was taken aback. The sales guy? I was just asking him about the perfumes. Why? Seemed like you were really into him, Michael shot back, his eyes hard. Are you serious right now? I stopped walking, staring at him in disbelief. I was talking about perfumes, Michael. What's gotten into you? He scoffed, shaking his head as he started walking again. Nothing. Forget it. Let's just go home. But it didn't stop there. It got worse. Anytime I talked to a man, Michael would sulk or make snide comments. He became colder at home, too, retreating behind his laptop or phone, leaving me to eat dinner alone most nights. One evening, I decided to confront him. I couldn't stand the icy atmosphere anymore. I found him in his study, staring blankly at a spreadsheet. Michael, we need to talk, I said, standing in the doorway. He didn't look up. About? About us. About how you've been acting lately. I walked over and closed the laptop in front of him. You've been distant, and any time I interact with another guy, you act like I've committed some crime. He rubbed his temples, sighing heavily. Emma, you don't understand the pressure I'm under at work. And when I see you, laughing and chatting with other men, it gets to me, okay? And sometimes, I feel like you don't respect our relationship enough to keep your distance. We stared at each other, the air thick with unsaid things, and the echo of our raised voices. But then, something new stirred the pot. Rumors from friends started trickling in, saying Michael had been telling people I was a flirt, chatting up other men whenever he turned his back. I couldn't believe it. You've been talking about me behind my back? Telling people I flirt with other guys? Look, Emma, it's not like that. I might have said something here or there, but it's only because I see how they look at you, how you. Stop. I cut him off, my anger peaking. I don't believe this. You have no right to spread lies about me. You're supposed to be my partner, Michael, not my biggest critic. After that last big fight, things between Michael and me cooled off a bit. One morning, I found a note from Michael on the kitchen counter. His handwriting, usually so precise, looked rushed this time. I picked it up, my heart pounding a little harder than usual. Emma, let's try to start over. Meet me at the Grandview Hotel, room 204, at 8 p.m. tonight. Let's put the past behind us and move forward. M. I stared at the note for a long minute. This was unexpected. Maybe this was his way of reaching out, trying to mend things. I decided to go, hope fluttering in my chest like a fragile bird. The day dragged by. Work was a blur. I couldn't focus on the customer orders or the inventory. My mind kept drifting back to the note, to what the evening might bring. Could we really start over? By the time I shut the shop and headed to the hotel, I was a bundle of nerves. When I arrived at the Grandview, my palms were sweaty. I checked my reflection in the car mirror, fixed my hair, dabbed on a bit of lipstick. Not too much. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. Room 204 was on the second floor. The hallway was quiet, just the soft hum of the air conditioning. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, then, with a hesitant hand, turned the doorknob. It was open. The room was dimly lit by a bedside lamp, casting long shadows across the bed. There was an open bottle of wine on the table, 2 glasses beside it, and a small plate of fruit slices. But no Michael. Michael? I called out, stepping inside, letting the door click shut behind me. Are you here? Silence. Just the soft whir of the air conditioner. I thought about leaving, but then I decided to wait. I poured myself a glass of wine, the red liquid swirling in the glass. Just 1 glass, I muttered to myself, to calm the nerves. I took a sip, the wine rich and a little too sweet. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. The wine was starting to make my head a bit fuzzy, or was it my nerves? I lay back, just to rest my eyes for a moment. The room spun gently, and then everything went black. When I woke up, it was dark outside. I tried to sit up, but my head was pounding, and my thoughts were foggy. My phone was on the nightstand. I grabbed it, the light from the screen blindingly bright in the dim room. I checked the time. It was past midnight. Panic clawed at my chest. I tried to remember what happened, how I ended up lying here, but it was like grasping at smoke. I realized with a start that I was not dressed, lying there without my clothes. I called Michael, my fingers trembling as I dialed his number. The phone rang, then, his voice, cold and distant. Emma? What's up? Michael, where are you? Why didn't you come to the hotel? I asked, my voice shaking. Hotel? What are you talking about, Emma? Are you drunk? Have you lost your mind? I'm at the Grandview, like you told me. Why did you ask me to come here if you weren't going to show up? My voice rose in anger and confusion. Emma, I don't know what sick game you're playing, but I didn't write any note. I've been home all night. You're out of control, running around with your lovers. I even thought about calling the police. Driving home from that disastrous night at the hotel, my mind was in turmoil. Michael's cold, dismissive voice on the phone replayed over and over in my head. What was happening? It felt like I was being sucked into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. As I pulled into the driveway, the familiar sight of our home brought no comfort, only a knot of dread in my stomach. I stepped inside, and the tension hit me like a wave. Michael was pacing the living room, his face twisted in anger. As soon as he saw me, he exploded. There you are. The wandering wife returns, he yelled, his voice dripping with scorn. Michael, please, we need to talk. Something very wrong happened tonight. I pleaded, my voice shaky but desperate to make him understand. But he wasn't listening. Instead, he slammed a stack of photos on the table. Explain these then, he shouted. I picked up the photos, my hands trembling. They showed me in a hotel room, in bed with a man I had never seen before. My heart sank. Michael, I don't know who this is. I swear, I've never seen this man before. Something happened to me tonight, something I can't explain. He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that sent shivers down my spine. A monstrous mistake? Or just your monstrous behavior? Marrying you was the real mistake. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I fought them back, needing to stay strong, to stay clear-headed. I didn't do this, Michael. You have to believe me. But he wasn't done. Believe you? Why should I? You're a liar and a cheat. And I'll make sure you don't get a cent from me. I'm going to court, and I will take everything from you, as per our agreement. He spat out before grabbing his suitcase, already packed, and heading for the door. With a final glare, he slammed the door behind him, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of the house. I collapsed on the couch, my body shaking. The pain in my head was relentless, throbbing with an intensity that made it hard to think. But it was more than just a headache, it felt like my brain was foggy, my memories of the night blurred and inconsistent. That's when it hit me, the wine. I had only one glass, but the dizziness and the blackout didn't make sense. It was too extreme, too sudden. I grabbed my phone and dialed my friend Lisa, a nurse, hoping she could shed some light on my symptoms. Lisa, something's not right. I had a glass of wine, and then everything went black. I woke up hours later, and now Michael has these photos. It doesn't add up, I explained hurriedly, my words tumbling out. There was a pause on the other end as Lisa digested my words. Emma, it sounds like you might have been drugged. You need to get to a hospital or a lab and get tested right now. Tell them what happened, especially about the wine and your symptoms. The drive to the lab was a blur, my thoughts racing as I tried to piece everything together. At the lab, I explained the situation to the technician, who nodded solemnly and took several vials of blood. A couple of days after my visit to the hotel, a letter arrived with a heavy thud on my doorstep. It was from Michael. My hand shook as I tore it open, my worst fears confirmed in the cold, formal language of the legal notice. Michael was suing me for infidelity, aiming to strip me of everything I owned based on our prenuptial agreement. The trial was set for a month from now. I called my lawyer, Paul, immediately. His voice was a small comfort amid the chaos. Emma, come to my office. We need to strategize. I drove to Paul's office, my mind racing with every possible scenario except the one where I came out unscathed. As I pulled into the parking lot, my eyes caught a familiar figure, Michael, walking alongside a young man, the same one from the photos he had used to frame me. Without thinking, I reached for my phone and started recording. I caught them exchanging an envelope, the young man tucking it quickly into his jacket. My heart pounded as I realized the significance of what I might have just captured. At Paul's office, I showed him the video. His eyebrows shot up as he watched the exchange. This is good, Emma. It's very suspicious. I think it's time we brought in a private investigator. Paul's friend, a seasoned private investigator named Jack, took the case. He moved quickly, tailing the young actor and digging into his background. A few days later, Jack called us into the office with news. I've spoken to the kid, Jack started, his expression serious. He's a bit of an actor, down on his luck. Said your husband hired him to play a part. The part? Your lover. He also confessed that your husband planned everything, even the drugged wine. As we were talking, my phone pinged with an email, my blood test results. I opened the attachment, my breath catching as I read the findings. Positive for a potent sedative, just as Jack had said. I passed my phone to Paul, who read the results and looked up, his eyes hardening with resolve. This is it, Emma. This is what we need. With this evidence, we can not only defend you, but also turn the tables on Michael. Paul advised keeping everything under wraps until the court date. Let's not tip him off. We'll hit him with this in court, give him the surprise of his life. A week had passed since the hotel debacle, and I was back in the familiar confines of my lingerie store, trying to keep my mind off the upcoming court date. It was a regular afternoon until Michael walked in, a woman on his arm. Emma, meet Lila, my bride-to-be, he announced with a pride that didn't quite reach his eyes. Lila looked young, too young perhaps to understand the type of man she was dealing with. She glanced at me with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Michael wasted no time stirring up trouble. "Take a good look around, Emma. Soon enough, all this will be mine." His arm swept across the expanse of my store with theatrical grandeur, a smirk playing on his lips. Lila's eyes followed his gesture, her look hardening with more conviction. I wanted to reach out, to warn her, but I remembered Paul's strict instructions to keep quiet until the hearing. All I could do was smile thinly and respond with as much dignity as I could muster. "We'll see what the judge has to say about that, Michael." The day of the court session arrived all too quickly. The courtroom was austere, the air thick with anticipation. Michael, ever the lawyer, chose to represent himself. He stood, adjusting his tie, a clear show of self-assurance as he prepared to deliver his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael began, his voice steady and clear, "today you will see the true colors of a woman who not only broke the vows of marriage but sought to destroy the sanctity of our home with her deceit. As you will see from these photos," he continued, gesturing to the evidence displayed on the screen behind him, "my wife, Emma, was not the faithful partner she promised to be." The photos from the hotel room flashed up, eliciting murmurs from the courtroom. For months, I lived in torment, suspecting her infidelities. And finally, as these pictures show, my worst fears were confirmed. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink. He walked closer to where I sat, his eyes locked on mine. "Emma here would have you believe she's a victim, an innocent caught in circumstances beyond her control." His tone was scathing, his words rehearsed, but effective. "But I tell you, she is not a victim. She is a perpetrator, a destroyer of our union." As he spoke, I could see the calculated pauses, the measured glances at the judge, the way he laid out each sentence with the precision of a seasoned attorney. "The evidence is clear, undeniable. Emma's actions have caused irreparable damage, not just to our marriage but to the very fabric of trust that binds any relationship," Michael concluded, his speech crescendoing in a dramatic plea for justice. My lawyer, Paul, had a calm demeanor as he rose to address the court, his briefcase full of the evidence that would clear my name. "Your Honor," Paul began, his voice steady and commanding. "Today, we not only defend Emma Clark's honor but also reveal a pattern of deceit perpetrated by her husband, Michael Clark." He motioned to the back of the courtroom, and the actor whom Michael had hired walked in, his presence causing a stir among the spectators. Paul asked him to share his involvement, and the young man looked nervously around before speaking. "I was hired to act a part, I thought it was just a prank," he admitted, his voice shaky. "I didn't realize the seriousness of what was being orchestrated." Paul nodded gravely, then presented the blood test results to the court. These results show that Emma was incapacitated against her will, drugged by substances she had no knowledge of consuming. The courtroom murmured as the implications sank in. "Furthermore," Paul continued, his tone hardening, "this is not the first time Mr. Clark has employed such tactics." He laid out evidence of Michael's previous marriages, detailing how similar patterns had led to his unjust enrichment at the expense of his former wives. As Paul concluded his arguments, the weight of the evidence was palpable. "We ask not only for the dismissal of the fraudulent claims made against Emma, but also for just compensation for the ordeal she has endured." The judge nodded, taking in everything before delivering her verdict. "After careful consideration of the evidence presented, I find in favor of Emma Clark. The prenuptial agreement is hereby annulled." Relief washed over me, tears pricking my eyes, not just from the victory but from the vindication. "Furthermore," the judge added, "the court awards Mrs. Clark damages in the amount of $400,000. Michael's face was ashen, his future crumbled before him. His fiancée, present in the courtroom, hurried out, only to return briefly to whisper a thank you to me for exposing the truth before leaving him for good. The news of the trial spread like wildfire, the details sensational enough to hit the headlines. Michael's professional reputation was irrevocably damaged, he was stripped of his license to practice law. The revelation prompted his ex-wives to file lawsuits against him, uncovering a trail of deceit that left him financially and socially bankrupt. As I closed up shop one evening, the glow of the sunset casting long shadows on the floor, I reflected on the journey. The battle had been hard-fought, marked by moments of despair and indignity, but ultimately, it was a testament to resilience and justice.
Cutlet is Rebecca's favorite, don't you? As a daughter-in-law, you should consider the family's favorites when planning meals. I'm sorry, I'll be more careful next time. I replied nonchalantly and ignored my mother-in-law's sarcasm. I headed to the kitchen to put away the groceries. The meek Rebecca, who had returned home after her divorce, was nowhere to be found. I think now that her apology to me and my husband was just an act. And she had planned to stay at her parents' home all along. My mother-in-law, initially very kind, is now completely under Rebecca's influence. Now, they both harass me daily, treating me like a maid. I do all the household chores. And with my part-time job, I'm always exhausted. Rebecca does no housework and contributes nothing to the living expenses. She either lounges around like a lazy bear or goes out dressed up gaudily. I think we should end this living arrangement, but my husband is often away. And it's hard to have a discussion about it. There's another reason too. Anna, welcome back. Even though it's Sunday, you've worked hard at your part-time job. I'll put away the groceries in the fridge. So take a break. Dinner is too much for one person, so I'll help you. Dad, thank you always. My concern is my father-in-law. With my husband gone, his kindness is what keeps me from falling apart. He treated Rebecca like a princess growing up, just like my mother-in-law did. But he's not afraid to call them out when she pushes me too far. She's my dear daughter, but I must correct her when she's wrong, he believes. However, every time, my mother-in-law scolds him, saying, "How can you, as a father, take your daughter-in-law's side over your own daughter? You're really a failure as a husband." I fear that once my husband and I leave this house, my father-in-law will be the one exploited and ridiculed instead of me. I reached the bedroom we use as a couple and sighed heavily. I took my wallet out of my bag and counted the bills inside, recording them in a notebook. There's a reason for this. A year ago, not long after Rebecca returned, I started noticing that the money in my wallet was decreasing. Money is missing again. It started with a few dollars feeling off and gradually increased. Being meticulous about money, I trusted my instincts and began keeping records. When hundreds were missing, I couldn't help but laugh at how obvious it had become that someone was stealing from my wallet. Despite taking measures like carrying my wallet around, Rebecca scolded me, saying, "It's in the way to carry a wallet around while doing household chores." I don't want to suspect a family member, but Rebecca is suspicious. It might seem bad to assume, but she hasn't worked since her divorce yet goes out often. How she manages money is a mystery. I've discussed this with my husband before, but there was no evidence. Next time, I'll definitely catch her in the act. It seems the thief is watching my movements closely, hardly showing any openings. I closed the notebook I had been recording in, put on my apron, and left the room. One day, as I was doing the housework that my mother-in-law had pushed onto me, I decided to take a break and headed to my room. Suddenly, I saw Rebecca opening the door and entering the room my husband and I share. Instantly, thoughts of the money in my wallet flashed through my mind. This was my chance to catch her in the act. Determined, I stepped in and found her frozen, clutching my wallet, even sticking her fingers inside it. This was definitive proof. "What are you doing?" In my calm voice, Rebecca hastily closed her wallet. "What do you mean?" "I just found your wallet in the hallway and thought I'd put it in your bag for you." "What were you doing, sticking your fingers inside it? If your story were true, you wouldn't need to do that, right?" Realizing she was suspected, Rebecca forced a smile. Are you accusing me? I haven't stolen any money. You always carry around just $500. Aren't you being a bit paranoid? Rebecca raised her voice and forcefully shoved the wallet back into my bag. There have been times before when the money in my wallet was missing. Please tell me the truth. Was it Rebecca who was taking it? Convinced that Rebecca was the thief, I confronted her directly. Indeed, I always kept about $500 in my wallet for emergencies. But I was the only one who knew that habit. What's going on here? Hearing Rebecca's loud voice, my mother-in-law appeared and looked at me. Mom, listen. She's accusing me of stealing money from Anna's wallet. And she says I've done it several times before. At Rebecca's plea, my mother-in-law glared at me sharply. Anna, how could you say such things to Rebecca? Ever since Rebecca came back, I've found that money keeps going missing from my wallet. And now, I saw Rebecca entering this room without permission and touching my wallet. My desperate plea was ineffective against my mother-in-law, who unconditionally supported her daughter. A thought flashed in my mind that I should have recorded the evidence on my phone. But I was too focused on catching her in the act. How can you be such a horrible daughter-in-law? To treat Rebecca like a thief. I can't believe it. After all, you're just an outsider. Anna, you're just being paranoid. Perhaps you wanted to play the victim to attract attention? The word outsider hit me hard. I had tried my best as a wife and family member, even though it had only been 2 years. Enough was enough. Without saying a word, I left the room, slipped on my sandals, and walked outside. Where do you think you're going without making dinner? Rebecca's voice followed me. But I didn't care. My pace gradually slowed as it was getting dark and the wind felt cold. I had stepped outside in my indoor clothes and old apron. With bare feet and sandals, without my smartphone or wallet. Feeling lost, I sat on a park bench when, Anna, what are you doing here? I looked up to see my father-in-law in his suit. I recognized that apron from a distance. Embarrassed, I realized this apron was a gift from my mother-in-law when we agreed to live together. Taking the canned soda he offered, I thanked him. And overwhelmed, I began to cry. I told him everything, how the money had occasionally gone missing since Rebecca returned. And how today I finally caught her, but my mother-in-law wouldn't believe me. And both of them verbally attacked me. My father-in-law listened silently, then apologized deeply. I'm truly sorry. The behavior of my wife and Rebecca is too much. And I'm responsible for not stopping their misbehavior. Prefacing his next words with a thought he had been considering, he continued. Perhaps it's time to end the cohabitation. It's clear that neither I nor your husband would want you to endure this hardship. Surprised by his proposal, I was grateful but also worried about how he would fare without me. Anyway, let's go back. Buying a slightly expensive takeout might make them forget to complain. As I hesitated for words, my father-in-law smiled as if he could see right into my heart. As we returned home, just as I had imagined, my mother-in-law and Rebecca approached complainingly. Handing over the dinner I bought, their mood quickly improved. And they paid me no further attention. I used my father-in-law's distraction to go to my room and call my husband to discuss ending the cohabitation and to tell him about today's events. One evening a week later, as my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and I were having dinner, we heard the front door. It seemed Rebecca had returned from her outing today, but with a thunderous noise. Stomping down the hallway with a demonic expression, Rebecca appeared. Rebecca, please come home more quietly. Ignoring what my father-in-law said, Rebecca shot me a nasty look, pulled out a handful of bills from her wallet, and slammed them down hard on the table. Instead of the familiar $100 bills, these were just toy money showing a strange character, where you'd expect to see Benjamin Franklin. I was on a date with someone I met through a marriage agency today. And I embarrassed myself. Rebecca, were you engaged in a matchmaking service? I feigned surprise, which caused her to blush. That's not the point. What do you think you're doing? She shouted at close range, causing me to wince. I can hear you without shouting. Rebecca says she hasn't been taking money from my wallet. And since my mother-in-law doesn't believe me, I decided to put toy bills in my wallet as a test. It turns out Rebecca was the culprit after all. The fact that she used the toy bills without realizing only shows how habitual her stealing had become, probably not even bothering to check in the dim light of the room. I don't know who she was dating, but the person must have been quite shocked. Realizing she had inadvertently confessed due to my comment, Rebecca froze. At the other end of her gaze, my mother-in-law expressed shock, unbelievable. Rebecca, wasn't the pocket money I gave you enough? I've been giving you $300 a month from my savings. I can't believe what Anna said was true. My father-in-law, who had believed me from the start, looked at Rebecca with a look of astonishment. You were giving Rebecca that much money without telling me? My father-in-law sighed deeply as it was revealed that my mother-in-law had been giving Rebecca a substantial allowance each month. Rebecca began to make excuses. Well, if I remarry, I can be a housewife and live comfortably again. Finding a job and living alone is just too much trouble. This reasoning didn't hold up at all, and even though I had a lot to complain about, the notion that my money was funneled into Rebecca's matchmaking was just laughably absurd. Rebecca looked to our mother for support, but she averted her eyes. Realizing she had no allies left, Rebecca exclaimed, "It's just $100. You've embarrassed me twice, unforgivable." And raised her hand. I instinctively closed my eyes, but felt no impact. When I opened them, my husband was holding Rebecca's arm, having arrived like a hero, to the surprise of the entire family. "Why are you here? You weren't supposed to be back yet." "My work finished earlier than expected." My husband responded gently to my question, then turned to face my mother-in-law and Rebecca. "I've heard everything from Anna and Dad. On the day I fled the in-laws' house, I had spoken to my husband over the phone, detailing the mistreatment by my mother-in-law and Rebecca, and my inability to tolerate it any longer. My husband was really apologetic, and thought we should swap the real money for some toy bills to catch Rebecca in front of my in-laws and back up my claims. Now that it's clear Anna was right, shouldn't Mother and Rebecca apologize? Faced with my father-in-law's words and my husband's stern look, my mother-in-law and Rebecca were at a loss for words. Didn't Rebecca promise to find a new job and move out immediately? At my husband's reminder, my mother-in-law retorted, "This is Rebecca's home too. She can stay as long as she wants." Of course, that would have been fine if Anna wasn't being made to suffer. My husband said, standing by my side and placing his hand on my shoulder, which gave me strength. "I've gone over this with my father-in-law and my husband. But I just can't forgive you, Rebecca and mother-in-law. So, we're going to stop living together." My mother-in-law looked shocked, but I reminded her, "You were the one who said I was an outsider. By the way, I spoke on the phone with Rebecca's ex-husband recently. Apparently, her misuse of money and her emotional abuse were the real reasons for their divorce, not what she had been telling everyone." He was furious that he hadn't demanded compensation out of compassion. This was news to all of us, and we all exclaimed in surprise. "Why are you contacting him without permission? You're the one at fault for lying to us." Her ex-husband said he's definitely going to demand compensation from her. Rebecca's face, previously flushed with anger, now turned pale with fear as she trembled. It seems my husband had always had doubts about the reasons for her divorce. Inspired by my father-in-law's words, I decided to make a bold move and called the ex-husband myself. At this point, Rebecca was on the verge of tears. By the way, Rebecca, I've been keeping accurate records of the money you took from my wallet. Please make sure to pay it back. My words were the final blow, causing Rebecca to slump to the ground, utterly defeated. Half a year later, after my husband and I moved out, I learned from my father-in-law that my parents-in-law had kicked out Rebecca. According to him, my mother-in-law had finally come to her senses and was now like a different person, even doing household chores. We hadn't cut ties completely, but we decided to keep our distance unless necessary. The money Rebecca had stolen from my wallet was returned, although in installments, from the money she earned working. However, her ex-husband, outraged by her claims, sued her for compensation for the emotional abuse during their marriage. It's only right that she ended up like this because of her lies. Recently, I received an apology letter from my mother-in-law. I had a moment where I recalled my caring mother-in-law from when I just moved in. But there was no way to take back what happened after that. Now, with my husband's work more relaxed, we are enjoying a peaceful life together. I'm committed to never taking anyone's love for granted, and to ensuring I never hurt those important to me.
Do they call this fate? My heart skipped a beat as I heard the term fate. Grace gave a little laugh. Maybe it's odd to hear that from a tall woman like me, she replied. Then she got up and walked away with Grace. If you were my destined partner, nothing would make me happier. As Grace skillfully fixed her kimono, I couldn't help but stare at her blankly. I'm 30 years old, and my name is Henry. The historic Hot Spring Inn where I work has been around for 130 years. Am I in charge of cleaning, serving food, front desk, guest services, or housekeeping? Everything is done by me, with the exception of cooking. Being the youngest member of the team, I frequently get assigned to odd jobs and physical labor. Only 2 groups of guests today, huh? I was going to sigh as I looked at the guest ledger at the front desk when I heard a somber voice behind me. Just 2 groups today, huh? A stunning woman wearing a kimono was standing there when I turned around. It was this inn's youthful proprietress, Grace. Her somewhat big lips and fascinating eyes were exactly what I liked. However, she was 3 years older than me and towered over my 165 centimeters frame at 173 centimeters. It was difficult to believe that she ever considered me as a potential love interest. We will fail at this rate, she whispered. I wonder if there's a way out of this. I took one look out the window. Even though it was far away, its sheer size was intimidating. Since it first opened, that enormous resort hotel had put our historic inn through a difficult period. People had been drawn away from this quaint old hot spring village by the imposing structure that had suddenly appeared in the center of it. Attracted by the resort's opulence, guests completely avoid our inn and make their way there instead. Sensing the danger, other local inns had enlarged or refurbished to keep their customers. But our inn missed that shift, or rather, we deliberately decided not to follow it. Built 130 years ago, this inn was still standing precisely as it had been. The mansion has withstood the devastation of war and has been meticulously maintained without any changes. I prefer not to make any changes to this beautifully preserved historic home, I replied. Sophia, the proprietress, and Tyler, her husband, were determined to maintain it that way. It was more than simply stubbornness, of course. Even I thought that making any changes to this place would be a shame. The massive timber beams had gracefully weathered over more than 130 years. The black, polished pillars were dignified. The plaster walls, which naturally controlled humidity, were warm but practical. The lobby ceiling was my favorite feature. The big pine logs that served as rafters were stunning. But it wasn't without problems. Because of this, winters are frigid and insects can occasionally slink through tiny openings. Although we have been patching cracks and performing small repairs, old homes are inherently cold and drafty. We can never fully address it, no matter how hard we try. However, I think the charm is enhanced by taking a bath in a hot spring in such circumstances. It is the greatest. I can't dispute reviews that claim it's overly chilly and outdated, though. I wish more people could realize the advantages of this vintage appeal. Grace's melancholic expression stirred a strong desire in me to help somehow. Then, an idea suddenly popped into my head. How about kimonos? I suggested. Grace blinked, surprised. Kimonos? I nodded. My grandmother left me a large collection of kimonos. You know how some places let guests choose their favorite yukata? What if we did something similar, but lent out kimonos? That could help us stand out. This little hot spring town already has a nostalgic atmosphere. I've always thought it would be beautiful to see couples strolling around in kimonos. Kimonos would also look stunning inside this inn. Grace's eyes widened. That sounds wonderful. Her face lit up, and I felt my cheeks heat up a little. Oh, but those kimonos are precious keepsakes from your grandmother. Are you sure? She asked, her glowing expression clouded with concern. I forced a reassuring smile. Of course. Actually, I've been airing them out at my parents' house regularly, and honestly, it's a lot of work. If they could be put to good use, I'd be relieved. And I think my grandmother would be thrilled too. My grandmother had adored kimonos. She came from a wealthy family and had received a number of kimonos as her wedding gifts. Even after marrying my grandfather, she saved up her allowance to buy more, little by little. Friends who knew of her love for kimonos would often pass along ones they no longer needed. As a result, she ended up with a massive collection. After her passing, we didn't know what to do with them. Selling off her beloved kimonos didn't feel right, and it's not like I could wear them myself. The kimonos had been relegated to the back of my mind, only to resurface during the seasonal airing. But seeing Grace's worried face brought them back to the forefront. After consulting with Sophia, we decided to make use of the kimonos. I and a coworker drove to my family home in a large car to pick them up. You've been waiting for this moment, haven't you? I decided to speak to my grandmother's keepsakes. Somehow, they seemed to gleam a little brighter. We brought the kimonos into the large banquet hall, spread them out, and inspected them one by one. Grace let out a surprised gasp as she looked at one of them. Wait, is this? It was an elaborate formal kimono, primarily pink with a scattering of small floral patterns. Oddly, the fabric beneath the hidden overlay tuck was patched with a completely different material. That one might not be suitable for casual lending. The added fabric and its extravagance might make guests uneasy, I explained. Before I could finish, Grace dashed off. I stood there, dumbfounded, as she hurried back just moments later. And then this, she exclaimed, thrusting a photo in front of me. It was a photo of a tall girl smiling in front of a small guest house, dressed in a traditional kimono. The kimono she wore was the very same formal attire I saw before me now. The location in the background. My eyes widened. I went on a trip with my mother just once, Grace said wistfully as she gazed at the photo. Travel was a rare luxury during her childhood as the families kept them busy. But once, her father, Tyler, had arranged for a short overnight trip for Grace and Sophia out of consideration for Tyler. They had chosen a simple trip, staying at a small seaside guest house and enjoying fresh seafood. That little guest house was my family's home, or to be precise, the one run by my grandparents. I lost my parents in a car accident when I was young, and since then, my grandparents had raised me in that guest house. On the front desk of the guest house, there was an amusing sign. Would you like to try wearing a kimono in our little fishing town where old rust-stained houses stood scattered and fishing boats were moored in the harbor? Kimonos seemed entirely out of place. It was a peculiar service for such a town, yet surprisingly many people expressed interest in trying it. It wasn't a main attraction or anything fancy. It was simply a casual offer for guests who noticed the sign and asked to wear it. Many never even realized it was an option. From the many kimonos my grandmother owned, she would let guests choose one to wear. Since it was too much work to lay them all out, guests would select from photographs instead. Grace had been captivated by a sparkling formal kimono adorned with scattered floral patterns. Seeing her excitement, my grandmother narrowed her eyes in delight and tried to let her wear it. But even back then, Grace had just started middle school and already stood 170 centimeters tall. The kimono wasn't long enough. I was so disappointed that day, Grace remembered, her brows furrowing slightly as she spoke. The kimonos worn by the proprietors of the inn were always plain and embellished. Having only seen such simple garments, Grace had been enchanted by the dazzling formal kimono and had been eager to wear it, only to have her hopes dashed. In the end, the only kimono from my grandmother's collection that fit Grace's height was a plain blue one. She went back to her room feeling a little sad, never getting to wear the formal kimono. Even so, the meal had been exceptionally delicious, the bath incredibly relaxing, and she thoroughly enjoyed the rare trip despite her disappointment. The next morning, as Grace and her mother, Sophia, were eating breakfast before checking out, my grandmother quietly sat down beside them. Then she handed over the formal kimono. "This should work for you now," she said. When Grace unfolded the kimono, she noticed that the central section had been patched with an entirely different fabric. "This part will be hidden under the sash," my grandmother said with a smile. "I'm not a professional seamstress, so it's not perfect, but as long as it's hidden, I hope you don't mind." My grandmother had extended the kimono so that Grace, with her tall frame, could wear it. She had cut the hidden section of fabric and stitched in an extension. Even though it was a makeshift solution, it must have taken considerable time. Yet, my grandmother didn't show a hint of tiredness, instead beaming at Grace. Grace delayed their checkout to wear the formal kimono, and she took a photograph with her mother, Sophia. Even now, the memory of that day warmed her heart. When Grace finished her story, I spoke up. "Now that you mention it, I once asked my grandmother why that kimono had a patch. She said it was for tall guests. I never imagined it was because of you." As a little boy, freely wandering around the inn, I might have even met Grace back then, but I had no memory of her at that time. I would have been in the 4th grade, a mischievous boy playing along the shoreline every day. Speaking of which, that day, your grandmother gave me a small seashell, saying, "My grandson collected this." Could that have been you? She smiled softly, and I turned bright red. I never knew the random seashells I picked up on the beach were being given to guests. It's funny how we were connected in such unexpected ways. Still blushing, I muttered, staring down at the floor. Grace exhaled softly. "Is this what they call fate?" The word fate made my heart race. Grace and my face grew even hotter. I couldn't bring myself to look up. Grace chuckled gently. "Maybe it's odd to hear that from a tall woman like me." With that, she stood up gracefully and went to check the other kimonos. If Grace really is my destined partner, nothing could make me happier, I thought, watching Grace gracefully handle the kimono. Her movements were mesmerizing as my thoughts wandered. In the end, I did not take over my grandparents' guest house, which was a place of memories for Grace. When my grandfather passed away suddenly, and my grandmother followed during my college years, I couldn't envision myself taking over the inn. Looking back now, I wonder if my decision to leave my corporate job after college and join this traditional inn was fueled, at least in part, by a lingering admiration for the hospitality industry. New services don't mean much unless people know about them. We added the Kimono Experience service to the inn's official website and booking platforms. We also launched official social media accounts and began promoting the service with photos. The formal kimono Grace wore in particular garnered a lot of attention and positive reactions. Then, a few days later, when I arrived at work, the inn was in chaos. The phones wouldn't stop ringing. One of my coworkers, phone in hand, stammered out, "Sorry, I don't know," in a mix of English and heavily accented Japanese. I had to stifle a laugh. Spotting me, Grace looked over with a furrowed brow. "Oh, Henry, it's incredible. Thanks to the social media post, we're getting so many inquiries from international guests. But aside from Grace and Sophia, who could manage basic English, no one else spoke any foreign languages. Even Grace and Sophia struggled when the conversations grew more complicated. On top of that, some of the languages were completely unfamiliar. Do you know of any good translation apps?" Grace was asking when another call came in. I answered the phone. The language was French. I hesitated for a moment, but responded in French. I could feel everyone around me holding their breath. It was an inquiry about the photos on social media. The question was whether they could wear the kimono Grace had worn, so I asked about their height and assured them it would fit. Their delighted response and promise to visit ended the call, only for the phone to ring again immediately. This time, the caller was American. Switching to English, I resumed responding. It was a question about pricing, so I checked with Grace and Sophia and informed them that it would be free for the time being. The calls kept coming in: Chinese, Korean, German. When one was in Arabic, I apologized and asked if English was okay, which they graciously accepted. Posting on social media that we were working on a queue and a page and asking people to hold their inquiries helped stem the flood of calls. I posted answers to the questions I've been asked so far, all in English for now. That day, I spent the entire time dealing with social media responses and didn't do any of my usual duties as an inn attendant. I spent the rest of the day creating a FAQ page in multiple languages, compiling answers to the most common questions we received. When I let out a sigh, Grace brought me a cup of tea. It was the roasted green tea served at the inn and my favorite. I couldn't help but smile. "Thank you. It's delicious, just what I needed," I said as I let out a deeply relaxed sigh. Grace gave me a puzzled look and said, "The one who should be saying thank you is me. I didn't know you could speak so many languages. That wasn't on your resume, was it, Henry? Who exactly are you?" I scratched my head awkwardly in response. "It's nothing special." I started to tell her my story. After losing my parents in an accident, I was raised by my grandparents at their guest house. But when I was in 5th grade, my grandfather passed away suddenly. It hadn't even been a year since Grace's visit when my grandmother decided to close the guest house without hesitation. The management of the guest house was almost entirely handled by my grandfather. In particular, the fish used in the highly praised dishes were freshly caught by my grandfather himself, something my grandmother could never have managed to procure, though his fishing buddies offered to help. My grandmother knew she couldn't replicate his cooking and decided it was best to close the guest house. Grandfather had often joked, "If Henry wants to take over someday, he can." But as a 5th grader, I hadn't given any thought to the future. We left the building as it was, thinking that if I ever wanted to reopen it someday, it would still be an option. Though his sudden passing was heartbreaking, the life insurance from my parents' accident and my grandfather's own policy ensured we weren't left in immediate financial trouble. At that moment, my grandmother had a brilliant idea. "It's an international world now," she declared, and started hosting homestay guests in the unused rooms of our guest house. What I thought would be a quiet life with just the two of us turned into a lively, bustling home filled with foreign visitors coming and going. My grandmother would serve delicious Japanese home-cooked meals to the homestay guests, and in return, she asked them to teach me their languages. Although their stays were short, the constant rotation of visitors meant I was exposed to a variety of languages and cultures. As a teenager, I thought it was just an unnecessary hassle. With school getting harder, I couldn't understand why I had to study French or Korean when I wasn't required to. I often complained loudly about how pointless it all seemed, but my grandmother always responded with the same words: "It's an international world now." My protests fell on deaf ears, and yet here I am now, able to help Grace and this inn. It turned out to have meaning after all, didn't it? I finished my story and took a sip of the roasted green tea. Grace's eyes went wide. "That's amazing. You learned to speak so well just from the homestay guests teaching you?" I tilted my head slightly. "Well, maybe. They all said I had a good ear for it. Every foreigner who taught me a language praised me for having a good ear. I would listen to the words they spoke, remember them, and repeat them as they were. I could remember and replicate anything I heard just once. Looking back, even in my childhood, I could memorize and sing anything, whether it was a song or something else, after hearing it just once. Since I wasn't particularly good at singing, it never occurred to me that this could be considered a special talent. That's not just a skill, it's like a superpower." Grace widened her eyes in surprise as she spoke, but I couldn't quite grasp what she meant. "I'm not so sure. I've never been confident about it. The homestay guests were all kind and always said excellent, even though my language skills were clumsy. They were just being nice, I think. Because of that, I never truly believed my words were understood. That's why I'd never claimed to speak foreign languages, and likely never would. Most of the guests at this inn were Japanese, and even when foreign visitors came, Grace's English was enough to handle things, so I never really had a role to play. But Grace shook her head firmly. If you can handle phone calls, then you're fine. For me, I can get by in English face-to-face with gestures, but phone calls are much harder. Not being able to see the other person's face, it's unnerving. She had a point. I couldn't tell from their expression whether they understood or not. Even when someone said, "Okay," it was hard to tell if they really understood. At this rate, we're going to see more foreign guests. There will probably be situations where I can't handle it alone. Grace turned to me, straightening her posture. I'm counting on you. Don't quit, okay? She bowed gracefully. I panicked. Wait, please don't. I'm not that special. Grace lifted her head. Not that special. You're amazing. Have some confidence. Her sharp gaze flustered me even more. Maybe I showed a little bit of a cool side today. I muttered, scratching my head awkwardly. Grace smiled gently. Henry, you're always cool. Her words made my face burn bright red. You're always the first to take the lead, she said. The senior attendants are getting older, and tasks that strain their backs or knees, you always take care of those for them. Everyone appreciates how thoughtful you are. That's what makes you so cool. I felt utterly embarrassed. I guess it's just because I grew up with my grandparents and got used to it. Grace's smile deepened. Well, if your grandmother raised you, it's no wonder you turned out to be kind and cool. I've always admired her. She must have stayed up late to extend the kimono for me just because I looked so sad. I think she's amazing, and she's still my role model. I want to become a proprietress like her, someone who can naturally empathize with others. As she spoke, Grace opened her palm in front of me. In her hand was a small bottle filled with sand and a tiny pink seashell. Grace chuckled softly. I love that little shell so much that my mom and I bought this small bottle at a souvenir shop, filled it with sand, and put the shell inside. It's been nearly 20 years, but it's still beautiful, isn't it? The shell I had picked up from the beach 20 years ago now shone brightly in Grace's hands. Looking at it, I felt as if my grandmother were cheering me on. Grace, I love you. Grace's eyes whitened at my sudden confession. It's fine. I understand. I know I'm not even on your radar. I'm younger than you, shorter than you, and completely unreliable. But just like that little shell, I'd like to stay by your side. I want to be the one who supports you the most. That's why I'll never leave. Grace's lips trembled. So, are you confessing to me or rejecting me? Her words confused me, and I tilted my head. But isn't it normal? Don't most men dislike women who are taller and older than them? Grace bit her lip tightly, and I panicked. What? Don't women dislike younger men who are shorter than them? Still looking down, Grace shook her head slowly. I don't dislike it. Tears welled up in my eyes. Is it really okay? Because I'm serious. Ever since I found out you once stayed at my grandparents' guest house, I've been thinking, what if you're truly my destined partner? Could you really choose me? Grace lifted her face. I've been thinking the same thing, but I'm tall and older, and I always thought someone small, cute, and sweet would suit someone as kind and young as you. And then I learned you could speak so many languages. You're like a superhero. Are you sure I'm the one you want? I pulled Grace into an embrace. You're overestimating me. I'm just a guy who drank way too much milk trying to grow taller and still failed. You deserve someone taller, older, and more refined. Before I could finish, Grace smacked my back. Are you rejecting me? Her voice from within my arms made me tighten my embrace. There's no way I'd let this be a misunderstanding. Now that it's come to this, I'll never let you go. Grace whispered softly from within my hold, and I'll never give you up to some tiny, cute girl. Her words made me smile. I lifted my head slightly and kissed her on the cheek. She blushed deeply but smiled back at me. Several years later, Grace and I got married. Her parents retired, and Grace officially became the proprietor of the inn. I'm still handling a wide variety of tasks, and I don't have the dignity or presence to be called things like president, master, or boss. Even so, everyone treats me with respect, and I'm grateful. The kimono rental service thrived. It wasn't just foreign visitors. Japanese women also enjoyed renting kimonos to stroll around the town. When we put out a call for kimono donations to expand the variety, We received a generous response. Some of the kimonos were for children, which made them popular with families. Another hit was the option to take photos inside the inn. Guests took photos at various spots, such as with the lustrous black central pillar or from the second-floor space alongside the stately beams. The unique charm of this historic home is beautifully captured in these photos, which then circulate online, catching the eyes of new visitors and inspiring them to come. This positive cycle made both Grace and me smile. The small hot spring town embraced its identity as a town where kimonos shine, adding traditional decorations throughout. We collaborated with other inns in the area, allowing guests from any inn to rent kimonos from us at a discount. Of course, for guests staying at our inn, it remained free. We also did a bit of remodeling to highlight the beauty of the beams for photography. We removed some walls on the second floor and added a railing and space for better views. We installed underfloor heating in the cold hallways so guests wouldn't feel chilled after a warm soak in the baths. The renovations were minimal, but well received by our guests. After the outdoor bath closes, the staff takes a short rest. The guests retire to their rooms or enjoy their evenings as they please, and our children drift into their dreams. Late at night, we set up a baby monitor in the children's bedroom, and once a week, Grace and I share a drink together. Sometimes in the lobby, sometimes in the garden, and sometimes in front of the grand central pillar. Spending time enjoying a quiet drink with Grace at our favorite spots in the inn is our irreplaceable moment of relaxation. To think there were days when this inn had no guests. It feels like a dream now. Grace smiles softly as she brings the sake cup to her lips. Her movements were so graceful, so elegant. Even after all these years, I couldn't help but be captivated. It all started with Grandma's kimono, but everything since then, it's thanks to you, Grace. We'd highlighted Grace with her tall and elegant figure in our PR efforts. She was especially well received by tall foreign women as the hostess of the inn. Grace's gracious hospitality toward every guest who stays with us is nearly flawless. It's hard to find any faults in her conduct. Grace smiles softly and tilts her head slightly. That's thanks to Harry, giving it his all to support me, isn't it? Her words warmed me deeply. I downed the sake in the small cup in one go. Smile, I'll always give you my all. I held up the empty sake cup in front of Grace. She let out a soft chuckle and said, I'm counting on you, dear, as she handed me the sake-filled cup. As she filled my cup, I let the happiness of the moment sink in. Everything we had now was built on the foundation of countless acts of kindness. It began with my grandmother's kindness toward Grace, the kindness of people from across the country who donated their kimonos to us, the kindness of guests who wore the rented kimonos with care and respect, the kindness of this town's residents who came together to revitalize our little hot spring community, the kindness of Grace's parents who wholeheartedly supported the kimono rental venture, and the kindness of our staff who never abandoned the inn and gave their all to keep it alive. All these threads of kindness had been woven together, and now it was our mission to pass them down to our children and their children. From the baby monitor, we could hear the gentle sound of our children's peaceful breathing, a reminder of the love and care we were privileged to give. For now, my goal was simple: to pour boundless love into these children and nurture the kindness that they would one day pass on. I rested my head on Grace's shoulder and tilted the sake cup. Would you like to get warm inside? I could hardly get by on my own, but one day, in the park, I helped a homeless mother and her daughter. I lived in abject poverty. I had no idea why I acted in that way. Then, the firm I worked for lost its president unexpectedly, and the vice president, who was the president's younger brother, took over as president. I was feeling really depressed after I was dismissed for an unknown cause. But the daughter said, "Welcome back," with a small smile when I arrived home. "You've put in a lot of effort." Alex is my name. I work at an office as a single 29-year-old. I go by Lex among my school pals. Though I'm not very cool, I think it's a nice nickname. With my black hair and glasses, I project a dismal picture that makes me seem very mediocre, if not below average. I don't actively interact with people, although I can be thoughtful of others. Above all, my living conditions tell you that I am impoverished. In my opinion, my place is worse than that of a struggling college student. My rent for this cheap flat is only $130 a month. Though there isn't a wall dividing the two rooms, the apartment is really just one large space. The fact that the toilet and bathroom are apart is only due to the age of the structure. The floor is old, the rooms are thinly divided by thin walls, and the kitchen is small. Even somewhat loud voices can be plainly heard, albeit it's not like you can hear every sound. There is hardly any privacy. I hear a couple arguing next door right now. It's intolerable since it's not just arguments. Sometimes I can hear their private moments. In addition to the sounds of the neighbors, I can hear loud music coming from open windows outside and the sounds of illegally modified bikes. I therefore retreat to my room to decompress during these boisterous periods. Even though I don't yell or shout, talking angrily to myself at a reasonable volume makes me feel a little better. Verbally releasing my pent-up worry lifts my spirits. I find it more satisfying to express it aloud, but some people feel putting it down is good. It's free, and the very mention of it lifts my spirits. Give up the loud noises already. I'm not shouting, so no one is bothered, and my neighbors probably don't even notice. But at my age, one subject that often comes up is what's known as the marriageable age. Yes, please, I would like a girlfriend. Not that it's something to boast about, but in my 29 years, I have never had a girlfriend. I can't now afford to have a partner, but some of my peers already have children. I don't have the money to support her, even if I did. My student loan debt is the main source of my extreme poverty, and I'm barely making ends meet on a job that barely covers my living expenses. Becoming a parent seems like a far-off dream. At the workplace, despite my struggles, I'm seen as a hard-working employee who completes tasks on time. When I got to work one day, I saw some coworkers chatting. James, one of my coworkers, rushed over to ask me what was going on. Alex, there's been an incident. An incident? I had assumed there might have been embezzlement, but that was not the case. The president passed away suddenly. What? But as of yesterday, he was OK. That's why it's a sudden death. Mr. Bellamy, the president, had a distinguished appearance and was a dapper gentleman. He appeared to be an industrious man and always had a straight gait while wearing a suit. He appeared to be alert and steady on his feet, giving everyone in the office the impression that the company was still safe. I had seen him about the office a few times. Thus, everyone believed the company was in capable hands. Who do you think will be the next president? Well, there's probably going to be him, based on the hierarchy. Him. James was referring to Robert, the president's younger brother. Robert visited the office every now and then, but neither I nor the other staff members thought well of him. Why is he even the vice president? Because Mr. Bellamy was a family man at heart and could not leave them. Still, does he really produce any work? It was difficult for me to respond to this question. Robert was ultimately named the next president. It was logical since they couldn't hold onto the presidency indefinitely. If that occurred, other businesses may view us with contempt, and some might even attempt to profit from the circumstance. Nevertheless, we felt nervous because Robert would now be in charge of the business. This was due to Robert's lack of involvement in the business up until this point. I had my doubts that he even knew how the business operated. If you were going to be president, you would normally at least take a cursory look at management. Despite its small size, our company employed a respectable number of people. Providing for all of their families is a significant commitment. Robert did not really work as vice president, despite having that title. It seemed that several workers had witnessed him gambling on a regular basis. These games may be enjoyable when you win, but when you lose, they cost you a lot of money. And after a significant win, it's simple to get into the trap of thinking, next time for sure, and to keep putting money in, which leads to a losing streak. We were very uncomfortable knowing that Robert, the new president, had been engaging in such activities. However, there were more causes for concern regarding Robert. Oh man, I'm only feeling dread, James. I mean, there are rumors he messed up at his previous company too. Got it wrong. Do you mean that he ran afoul of his boss? Exactly. This was a widely recognized tale. Robert had a reputation for losing his anger and had already run afoul of his supervisor at his previous job. And that was only 6 months after his enlistment. I was first taken aback by it. Nowadays, Most people prepare themselves for the ordeal of a new company's first year. Giving up after only 6 months seemed really self-centered. Then the benevolent Mr. Bellamy appointed his impoverished brother vice president, though it's likely that he also attempted to force him to work. It wouldn't have been much use even if he had forced him to perform the vice president's duties. Indeed, it is true. Now that he's president, I hope he grows a little more mature, James remarked. James had little chance of realizing his dream. Individuals are not easily changed. Emma from accounting had been in charge of most business affairs up to this point. Emma was a well-known yet enigmatic figure. None of us had ever seen her before or had any idea of her appearance. It was also widely known, though, that the former president possessed a great deal of faith in her. She was virtually a legendary character we never saw because she was constantly locked up in the accounting room. We had never had a conversation over the phone. As Robert assumed the presidency, I was curious about Emma's future. As an employee, however, there was little I could do about it. But my fears quickly came to pass. When Robert unveiled his policies in his inaugural speech as president, we were all taken aback. "Robert, I'm the next president. There won't be any more leniency now that I'm in charge. I'm not sure how my brother handled things. I will not spare those who disobey my policies. I will fire them all." The older staff members clicked their tongues and mumbled things like "stupid brother" in response to the haughty and conceited speech. Going forward, a numerical goal will be discussed at every morning meeting. If it is not met, there will be a salary reduction. Put up a lot of effort and be organized. What? Yelled my mind, though I didn't speak it aloud. While setting goals is one thing, cutting pay for not reaching them is just plain oppressive. Pay attention. At work, quick thinking, discernment, and decisiveness are crucial. Do not procrastinate in an attempt to accrue overtime compensation. That's simple for him to say, but in many cases, overtime is unavoidable. That's just the nature of the job. However, Robert would scream at the top of his lungs if the work was even slightly delayed, which made him incredibly unreasonable, possibly due to his ignorance of genuine work. As a result, I was under constant stress, yet I managed to get by. I turned down a drink invitation from my coworkers that day after working all day and went directly to the cheap supermarket close to my apartment. For the local impoverished students, this grocery always offered fantastic deals. However, they put more discount stickers right before closing time. I didn't hesitate to add several significantly reduced prepared meals to my basket. Maybe this is the supermarket's method of making sure they sell out of all of their prepared foods before the end of the day. Along with the salad, which was on sale for 80% less. I also swung the plastic bag I was using as a reusable shopping bag, which was ready to develop holes from frequent use, as I exited the store. In this late hour of the night, I was walking home when I noticed 2 women huddled together on a bench in a small, dark park. I would have ignored it if it had just been 2 women chatting in the park, but there was something strange about them, so I paused and just watched. Based on their similar looks, the 2 women appeared to be mother and daughter. It was close to 10:00 p.m. In addition, they were somewhat unclean and were dressed extremely casually for the occasion. I walked carefully into the park, listening to their chat while feigning to get a warm drink from the nearby vending machine. "Mom, I'm cold." "It's all right. Just get closer and snuggle." "Thanks, it's much better now." I knew they were a mother and daughter based on their conversation. It appeared like the mother was in her early 50s and the daughter was in her 20s. What became of them? Even though they were wearing branded clothing, their outfits were filthy. I thought of the weather report I had seen on the TV that morning. They warned that although it wouldn't rain, it will get rather chilly tonight. I had never met either of these people before. Although my sense of justice would not allow me to ignore them now that I had seen them, no one would hold it against me if I left. Even so, I wasn't sure if approaching them was appropriate. I couldn't just leave them behind, but I also didn't want to be thought of as a criminal attempting to transport women to my location. Well, nothing happens now. I decided what I wanted to do and went up to the mother and daughter. "I apologize, but I'm not a suspicious person. I don't intend to harm you in any way. It may sound a little optimistic, but the news indicates that it will get really cold tonight. Would you like to come to my apartment if you have nowhere else to go?" I realize I'm a total stranger. You can at least warm up in this rundown abode. What? I'll do nothing, I swear. All I can do is offer you a warm bath. I promise. I'll even leave the room if you'd like. Simply put, I don't think it's healthy for women to be alone. The woman needed to reassure me since I was starting to lose my train of thought. All right, I apologize. What made you come over here? We have nowhere to go and are homeless, as you can see. Well, isn't it natural to help someone in need? What? Of course, if you think it's none of my business, I apologize, but no, it's not that. Then, kindly accompany me. You can at least get warm, even though I can't offer much. I frantically invited the girl and mother to my rundown flat. I offered them the rear room and allowed them to use the bath, even though they appeared astonished by the location to which they had been taken. Since I had no women's clothing, I offered them an old school-issued tracksuit. I've washed it, though it might smell a bit like mothballs. It's all right. You've already helped us so much. For food, all I have is instant noodles and some prepared meals. But that's your meal, isn't it? Yes, so let's share it. I heated up the prepared meals and made 2 packages of instant noodles, dividing them into bowls and plates as I waited for the 2 of them to finish their bath. My impoverished bachelor's house has mismatched plates around. Although it was a little awkward, there was nothing I could do about it. Sincerely, I was relieved that I had kept some extra forks and spoons. I'm sorry I invited you so confidently, but this is all I can offer, I said. No worries at all. They shook their heads at my apology, but we still appreciate it. Their generosity brought me joy. They introduced themselves once the 3 of us had completed our little supper. This is Catherine, my daughter. My name is Emma. We haven't had a warm bath or dinner in a very long time, Emma remarked. My name is Alex. Alex, are you not just full of justice and kindness? Emma said this with a smile. No, I'm just poor. However, you were helpful to us. The majority of individuals would simply turn away, particularly if they were having difficulties. Additionally, I'm sure you were hesitant to welcome women into your house. It's true that I was really skeptical. There are plenty of people in this world who would profit from kindness, but Emma and Catherine didn't seem to be that type of person. Please stay here if you have nowhere else to go. Seeing a light on when I go home from work gives me comfort. I won't force you. It's a rundown apartment. But if it's not too much work, it's a modest, old place that can at least keep you warm in the winter. James would probably laugh and tell me I was too kind if I told him about this. Even so, after just one day, I couldn't bring myself to throw them out. It's like discovering a stray cat and then experiencing the heartbreak of having to give it up once more because you are unable to care for it. Emma and Catherine glanced at each other, paused to consider, then turned to face me and said, "We'll accept your hospitality," grinning with relief. I offered them the rear room as I had intended, and to maintain their privacy, I draped a bath towel in the space left by the thin wall. I made a bed in the kitchenette area by spreading cushions. After giving the 2 women the folding bed and mattress, that evening ended. Emma left early the following morning, claiming to have some errands to run. I didn't want to be a burden on my rundown flat, so I couldn't say anything as she was leaving to find another somewhere to stay. But Emma did not come back that day or the day after that. In other words, Catherine and I were the only residents of the flat, and I was strangely happy with our new situation. Ultimately, I could now return to a warm, well-lit room instead of the rundown, dark, and lonely chamber I had before. It goes without saying that I began to look forward to getting home from work. "Hi, Alex. I'm back." When I came back, Catherine smiled at me, and I smiled back. In the small kitchen, Catherine would prepare delectable dishes. There weren't many ingredients in the fridge, so on my way home, I'd pick up whatever seemed like it was needed from the regular cheap grocery, and she'd make it into a meal. It was like magic to me. It became a turning moment in my life to have someone wait for me when I returned home. I became aware of the value of people supporting one another after meeting Catherine. I was shocked to see Catherine at work a few days after it started to become the standard for her to be there when I got home. What the hell is this? On my desk, there was a piece of paper. Regardless of how many times I cleaned my face or massaged my eyes, The phrases remained the same. It was a notice of termination. No way. Now that Catherine was living with me, I had to increase my income. But we'd be homeless together if I got fired. I went directly to the president's office since I could not accept this unilateral termination. Robert was sighing heavily as I loudly knocked twice and opened the door without waiting for a response. Robert, are you there too? How annoying. What? Not sure why I was there, I asked him, not understanding his statement. Robert, what is the meaning of this? I don't know, but isn't this termination notice from you? I gave him a hard slap on his desk for being fired. Throwing a couple more notices of termination onto his desk, Robert appeared irritated. You're the fifth person today. What? Yes, 4 more workers have just barged in carrying similar termination notices. I cannot recall releasing any of them. Is that true? What good would it do me to lie? I scowled at Robert's irritated response. Robert would not gain by my termination. But then, who was giving the workers these notices of termination? I had never been a huge problem for anyone, nor had I ever inspired hatred or resentment in others. Well, this is real though. What? Robert grabbed the notice of termination bearing my name off the desk while I was still in astonishment. And before I could stop him, he stamped it with his permission. Wait, please. Don't wait. This serves as formal notice of termination. Gather your belongings and exit the business. Presumably, one of the executives is phoning the ineffective ones. Robert then chowed me down like a beast outside the workplace. When I got back to my desk, I saw James was furious and had received a notice of termination as well. James, however, laughed about it because he had been thinking about changing jobs since Robert became president and thought this was an excellent opportunity. Envious of James' upbeat disposition, I packed away my desk. Catherine gave me her regular greeting when I got home. Hey, hello. You're early for today. Catherine smiled kindly to greet me. I told her everything that had transpired, forcing a grin. Actually, I got fired today. Catherine smiled mischievously, rather than looking surprised. She poured me a cup of hot coffee at the folding table she called a dining table, and I followed her, startled by her response. Taking a taste of the coffee made me feel a little less anxious. First, thank you for your hard work. No, it's... Catherine started talking, and I felt that instead of squandering time, I should start considering the future. Let me reintroduce myself first. Catherine Bellamy is my name. Does that ring any bells? What? Bellamy is my last name. Samuel Bellamy was the name of my father. What? Yes, my father was the former president of the company you worked for. I was speechless at what Catherine had said. More than anything, I was perplexed as to why it hadn't occurred to me earlier. It's not as if the Bellamy surname is particularly common. My mother and I were ejected from our house by my Uncle Robert following the death of my father. We ended up being vagrants. He left the house with everything, even our savings. Though I was aware of his rudeness, I was unaware of his extreme badness. After all, Robert was still Catherine's uncle, so I apologize. Continually calling him a jerk would not help her feelings. It's all right. He is the ultimate jerk, the king of jerks. I couldn't help but chuckle at such outstanding assessment. It had been 1 week since we were ejected on the day you discovered us. Really, we were at our wits' end. For this reason, my mother and I cannot help but feel obligated to you for our thanks. You deserve all of that, Alex. Our decision is to exact revenge on Robert. Revenge. I got shares from my father, which he doesn't even know I own, although he could not know that. It's demonstrated by the fact that she wasn't dismissed first. My understanding of Catherine's words was incomplete. When she said Emma was dismissed, what did it mean? My mother Emma works at the company as an accountant. What? Not at all. I had no choice but to speak up. My father had total faith in my mother's accounting abilities despite the fact that my parents were no longer married. Although their relationship didn't work out, they made excellent business partners. I recalled hearing gossip that Emma, who Mr. Bellamy trusted, was also well liked by the managers. They used to claim the business would be oak as long as Emma took care of the bookkeeping. Emma probably stayed hidden in the accounting room because she didn't want anyone to find out that she was managing her ex-husband's accounts. She most likely wished to prevent any needless hassles in light of their divorce. My mother has made all the arrangements over the last 3 days. In an attempt to close the business without Robert realizing, she has started firing staff members one by one. Looking back, as you say, there were undoubtedly indicators. I was the 5th person that day to receive a notice of termination, according to Robert. His demeanor suggests that he must have also gotten termination letters from multiple other employees. After the new company is established, my mother intends to rehire everyone she let go of. The shares are what I own. Robert is not qualified to lead the business. Catherine grinned and had a leader's confidence. Although she seemed like a kind woman to me, she turned out to be really amazing. There was a stir at the workplace a few days after this chat. What? Are you letting me go? This is absurd. That day's meeting saw the board of directors decide to fire Robert with unanimous consent. The board's decision was final and could not be changed. Robert, you can either come work for me or get a new job on your own. What will it be then? You believed in quick thinking, sound judgment, and decisiveness, as I seem to remember. Make a decision quickly. Robert immediately announced his departure from the company as a result of Catherine's pressure. Considering that he had just been at the top of the organization the day before, he must have detested the thought of working under his niece. He has pride in the wrong areas, which makes him a genuine problem. Nevertheless, Robert struggled and was unable to obtain a new employment. Reluctantly, Catherine agreed to keep him on staff as a handyman since she felt bad for him. You're quite generous, Catherine. I believe I'm a fool too, but perhaps my father's genes ran in my family. Perhaps I'll come to regret it as well. Catherine grinned, her eyes dazzling. For my part, Catherine and I eventually started dating after moving into the same room. To put it briefly, Catherine and I have started dating. I've finally broken the habit of never having a girlfriend. I could have danced with delight. I was so happy. Although Catherine expressed her satisfaction with remaining in this apartment, I thought of transferring to a larger home. She expressed her enjoyment of the warmth and intimacy it offered. Though our lifestyle isn't very opulent, we'll manage as long as we help one another. I think so, and I'm going to stay with her going forward.
Will you marry me? The words hung in our kitchen like a beautiful promise and a warning bell. Lucas knelt before me, holding up a ring that caught the afternoon light streaming through our window. My heart raced, but not entirely from joy. Yes, I whispered, then louder, yes, of course I will. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and I watched it sparkle while my stomach twisted into knots. The diamond was perfect, too perfect. My mind flashed to all his stories about his family's pranks. About engagement rings that turned fingers green and wedding cakes that exploded in people's faces. It's real, Lucas said, reading my expression. I swear on my life, Isla. No tricks. I pulled him close, breathing in his familiar scent of coffee and cologne. I believe you, I said, but my voice wavered. Behind us, small footsteps padded across the kitchen floor. Are you going to be my real dad now? Sophia asked, her 8-year-old face serious as she studied Lucas. He opened his arms and she ran into them. If you'll have me, kiddo. I watched them embrace, fighting back tears. This was everything I'd wanted since my divorce 3 years ago, a real family, a fresh start. But Lucas's family loomed over us like storm clouds. We need to tell your parents, I said, the words tasting bitter. Lucas's smile faltered. They'll be thrilled. Mom's been asking about grandchildren since Nathan and Caroline's wedding. That's not what I'm worried about. I touched the ring again, twisting it around my finger. Your brother put live crickets in Caroline's wedding dress. He was younger then. That was 2 years ago, Lucas. Sophia looked between us, her dark eyes worried. Is Uncle Nathan mean? No, sweetheart, Lucas said quickly. He just likes to play jokes. My whole family does. It's how we show love. I sent Sophia to finish her homework, waiting until she was out of earshot before continuing. Love shouldn't leave people crying in bathroom stalls or rushing to the emergency room with allergic reactions. They'll be different with you, Lucas insisted, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. They know how much you mean to me. Like they were different with Caroline? Or Amanda before her? Or Rachel? I counted his brothers pranking victims on my fingers. Your family drove away every girlfriend Nathan had until they found someone who'd put up with their traditions. Lucas ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd learned meant he was struggling. What do you want me to do? They're my family. I want you to stand up to them. To tell them that if they can't respect boundaries, they won't be welcome in our lives. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Lucas pulled out his phone. I'll call them now. We'll go over for dinner tonight, tell them about the engagement. Give them a chance to prove you wrong. My throat tightened. And if they don't? Then we'll deal with it together. He squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing over the ring. I choose you, Isla. You and Sophia. Always. I nodded, trying to believe him. But as he dialed his mother's number, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Bennetts had turned cruelty into an art form, disguising it as family tradition. And now I was about to become one of them. Mom? Lucas's voice brightened artificially. Great news. We're coming over for dinner tonight. There's something we need to tell you. I watched him talk, already planning how to protect myself, and more importantly, how to protect Sophia from whatever the Bennetts had in store for us. Because one thing was certain, they wouldn't change their ways without a fight. And I was ready to fight back. The engagement ring turned my finger green 3 days after the dinner at the Bennetts. I stared at the stain spreading across my skin like a bruise, remembering Evelyn's too bright smile as she hugged me. Welcome to the family, darling. Lucas found me scrubbing my hand raw in the bathroom sink. I'll kill them, he said, but his voice cracked. I'll call them right now. Don't bother. I wrapped a towel around my hand, hiding the evidence. Just tell me one thing, did you know? God, no. Isla, I swear. Because Nathan was filming the whole dinner on his phone. And your mother kept asking to see the ring up close. And your father. I swallowed hard. Your father said something about how some metals react differently to different people. Lucas slumped against the doorframe. They must have switched the rings when you went to help Mom in the kitchen. They violated our engagement, Lucas. The moment that was supposed to be just ours. My voice stayed steady, but inside, something hardened. And now we have to decide about the wedding. What do you mean? Whether we're inviting them at all. The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. Finally, Lucas straightened. They're my family. And what am I? You're everything. He reached for me, but I stepped back. But they'll never forgive me if I exclude them from my wedding. And I'll never forgive them if they ruin it. Sophia's voice drifted up from downstairs, singing along to some cartoon. The sound anchored me, reminded me what really mattered. Fine, I said. They can come. But we're setting conditions. Lucas nodded eagerly. Anything. First, Nathan surrenders his phone at the door. No cameras, no social media. Done. Second, your parents sign a contract. If they pull any pranks, any at all, they pay for the entire wedding. Lucas winced. They won't like that. That's the point. Hit them where it hurts, their wallet. I held up my stained hand. Unless you think this is funny? Of course not. He pulled me close, and this time I let him. I'll talk to them tomorrow. Make them understand this is different. But when Lucas returned from his parents' house the next day, his face told me everything. They signed, he said, dropping a piece of paper on our kitchen counter. But Mom said something about how Caroline didn't make these kinds of demands before her wedding. Caroline lets Nathan put worms in her coffee. She doesn't. Lucas stopped, seeing my expression. Okay, maybe once. But they promised to behave this time. Mom even cried when I showed her your hand. I picked up the contract, studying Evelyn and Richard's signatures. Crocodile tears. Can't you give them a chance? For me? Looking at him, at the hope in his eyes, the desperate need to believe his family could change, I felt my resolve soften. One chance, I said. But I'm not telling them about the backup plan. What backup plan? I smiled, thinking of the security team I'd already hired, the cameras I'd arranged to monitor the cake, the dress, everything. The less you know, the better. Just trust me. Lucas kissed my forehead. Always. That night, as I tucked Sophia into bed, she asked about her new grandparents. Are they going to come to the wedding? Yes, sweetheart. Even though they're mean sometimes? I smoothed her hair back, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes people do mean things because they think it's funny. But that doesn't make it okay. Like when Tommy put glue on Sarah's chair at school? Exactly like that. And what happened to Tommy? He got in trouble. And had to say sorry. That's right. I kissed her goodnight, then paused at the door. Sophia? If you ever see Grandma or Grandpa doing something that seems wrong, even if they say it's just a joke, you tell me right away. Okay? She nodded solemnly. I promise. Walking back downstairs, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back looked different somehow, harder, more determined. The Bennetts thought they were teaching me a lesson about their family traditions. Instead, they were about to learn one about consequences. Let them sign their contracts. Let them make their promises. I had plans of my own, and unlike theirs, mine wouldn't end in laughter. The wedding cake exploded in my face like a bomb of frosting and betrayal. One moment I was smiling, knife poised above the pristine white tears, Lucas's hands steady over mine. The next, I was wearing our $3,000 cake, chunks of it sliding down my dress while the Bennett family roared with laughter. Through the sugary haze, I saw Nathan's phone pointed at me, Caroline covering her mouth in mock horror. Evelyn clutched Richard's arm, tears of mirth streaming down her face. Oh, darling, she wheezed, you should see yourself. The ballroom fell silent except for their cackling. 200 guests watched, frozen, as I stood there dripping vanilla buttercream. Lucas's hand left mine. You promised, he said, his voice deadly quiet. You signed a contract. Oh, lighten up, Richard chuckled. It's tradition. Tradition? Lucas grabbed Nathan's phone, hurling it against the wall. It shattered like my trust in his family. You just cost yourselves $50,000. Evelyn's laughter died. Now, sweetheart. Don't. I finally found my voice, sharp as broken glass. Don't you dare try to explain this away. Sophia appeared at my side, her flower girl dress pristine compared to my ruined gown. She took my sticky hand. Mama? It's okay, baby. I squeezed her fingers, anchoring myself. Go with Aunt Ava for a minute. Lucas's aunt stepped forward, the only Bennett not laughing. She led Sophia away, shooting a disgusted look at her family. Come on, Isla, Nathan called. The video's going to get 1 million views. Lucas lunged for his brother, but I caught his arm. Don't. They're not worth it. Listen to your wife, Richard said. It's just a bit of fun. Fun? I turned to face them, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. You want to know what's fun? The restraining order I'm filing tomorrow. The lawsuit for breach of contract. The social media posts I'll make showing exactly what kind of family you are. You wouldn't dare, Evelyn hissed, all pretense of humor gone. Try me. I pulled Lucas toward the door. We're leaving. Anyone who's not a Bennett is welcome to stay and enjoy the reception. The rest of you can go to hell. Isla, wait, Caroline started forward, but Nathan yanked her back. Let the princess go, he sneered. She clearly can't take a joke. Lucas broke free of my grip then, his fist connecting with Nathan's jaw. The crack echoed through the ballroom, followed by gasps and screams. I didn't stay to watch the chaos unfold. In the bridal suite, I tried salvaging what I could of my dress. Lucas found me there, his knuckles bloody. I'm so sorry, he whispered, reaching for me. I stepped back. Don't. Just. Don't. What do you want me to do? I want you to choose. The words came out raw, honest. Them or us. Because I can't do this anymore, Lucas. I won't let Sophia grow up thinking this is normal. He sank into a chair, head in his hands. They're my family. And we're not. Of course you are. But cutting them off completely. They humiliated me on my wedding day. They filmed it. They laughed. My voice cracked. And you still can't choose? The silence stretched between us like years of future heartbreak. Finally, Lucas looked up, his eyes red. I'll tell them we're done. No contact, no holidays, nothing. Don't make promises you can't keep. I mean it this time. He stood, reaching for me again. This time, I let him pull me close. We'll move if we have to. Change our numbers. Whatever it takes. I nodded against his chest, breathing in his cologne mixed with vanilla frosting. But even as he held me, even as he whispered promises and apologies, I felt something shift inside me. The woman who walked down the aisle today died in that ballroom, replaced by someone harder, someone who understood that sometimes love wasn't enough. Because Lucas might have chosen me today, but tomorrow would test that choice. And the day after. And every day until either his family broke him or he broke them. I just had to decide which outcome I was willing to wait for. The pregnancy test shook in my hands like a live wire. 2 pink lines, clear, unmistakable, terrifying. 3 months of marriage, 3 months of fragile peace with the Bennetts, and now this bomb waiting to explode. I buried the test at the bottom of the kitchen trash, beneath coffee grounds and yesterday's mail. Lucas couldn't know. Not yet. Not until I figured out how to protect this child from his family's idea of tradition. Mama? Sophia padded into the kitchen, still in her pajamas. Are you sick again? I forced a smile. Just a little queasy, baby. Nothing to worry about. Is that why you were crying in the bathroom? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Evelyn's name flashed on the screen, making my stomach lurch for entirely different reasons. I declined the call, but seconds later, a text appeared. Saw you at the pharmacy yesterday. Buying something special? Winking face. The winky face mocked me. I deleted the message, but the damage was done. They knew. Somehow, they always knew. Lucas came home that evening with takeout and a strange expression. Mom called. Of course she did. I pushed my untouched food around the plate. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? Isla. He reached across the table, but I pulled back. She says you're pregnant. Are you? The silence stretched between us like a tripwire. Finally, I nodded. His face lit up. That's amazing! We have to celebrate, tell everyone. No. The word came out sharp enough to make Sophia look up from her homework. We're not telling them anything. They're already planning a baby shower. Mom's thinking games, decorations. Pranks? My fork clattered against the plate. What will it be this time? Fake miscarriage announcements? Gender reveal powder that stains skin? Or maybe they'll just wait until the birth and switch our baby with a doll. That's not fair. They've been trying. 3 weeks ago, Nathan put laxatives in Caroline's coffee. She was sick for days. That was different. They were just. Just what, Lucas? Just having fun? Just keeping up tradition? I stood, my chair scraping back. I won't let them near this baby. I won't let them turn our child into another punchline. Sophia slipped away to her room, quiet as a shadow. She'd gotten good at disappearing when voices rose. Lucas ran his hands through his hair. What do you want me to do? They're excited about their first grandchild. Second, I corrected. Or did you forget about Caroline's miscarriage after Nathan's harmless birthday surprise? The color drained from his face. We never talked about that day, about Caroline's screams when the Jack-in-the-Box sprayed her with compressed air, about the bleeding that followed. That was an accident, he whispered. Everything's an accident with them. Everything's just a joke until someone gets hurt. I pressed a hand to my still flat stomach. But I won't let them hurt this baby. Even if that means leaving. Leaving? Lucas stood so quickly his chair toppled. You can't be serious. Try me. I met his gaze steadily. Choose, Lucas. Right now. Either we move somewhere they can't find us, or what? Or I'll leave anyway. With both my children. The threat hung between us like poison gas. Lucas stared at me, then at the doorway where Sophia had disappeared, then back at me. They're changing, he said weakly. No. They're just getting better at hiding it. I walked to the window, watching darkness settle over our neighborhood. I won't raise another child in fear of their next tradition. Behind me, Lucas's phone buzzed. Another text from Evelyn, probably more baby shower ideas, more promises of family togetherness. More lies. 1 week, I said, not turning around. That's how long you have to decide. After that, I'm done waiting. His footsteps crossed the kitchen, paused at the doorway. I love you, he said softly. I know. I watched his reflection in the window glass. But sometimes love isn't enough. After he left, I pulled out my phone and opened a new message to Aunt Ava. She'd helped Caroline once, tried to at least. Maybe she'd help me too. Need advice, I typed. About leaving. Her response came immediately, come over tomorrow. Don't tell anyone. I deleted the exchange, then went to check on Sophia. She was already asleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit, a gift from the Bennetts that I'd carefully checked for hidden cameras or pranks. Never again, I promised silently. Never again would my children have to check their toys for traps. The funeral home smelled of lilies and lies. I sat in the front row, my black dress stretched tight across my 7-month pregnant belly. While the Bennetts turned my husband's death into their final joke. Remember when Lucas put salt in the sugar bowl? Nathan's voice cracked with laughter, not grief, as he delivered the eulogy. Mom was spitting out her coffee for days. Beside me, Sophia clutched my hand. 10 days since the accident, and she hadn't spoken a word. Not since the police came to our door. Not since I had to tell her Daddy wasn't coming home. And at his wedding, Nathan continued, but Aunt Ava cut him off. That's enough, Nathan. Oh, come on. Even Isla has to admit the cake thing was classic Lucas. My chair scraped back before I realized I was standing. The room went silent except for Evelyn's poorly concealed giggles. She'd been drinking since breakfast, I'd smelled it on her breath when she'd hugged me, whispered, at least he went out with a bang. The crash had been head-on. Lucas died instantly. The other driver walked away. Classic Lucas? My voice carried across the chapel. My husband is dead. Your brother is dead. And you're turning his funeral into a comedy routine? Lighten up, Richard called from his seat. He would have wanted us to laugh. He wanted you to change. The words tasted like blood in my mouth. He wanted you to stop hurting people. To be better. But you couldn't even give him that. Caroline stood, reaching for me. Isla, you're upset. The baby. Don't. I jerked away. Don't pretend you care now. Where were you when Nathan put those firecrackers in Lucas's car last month? The ones that made him swerve into a lamppost? The color drained from Caroline's face. Nathan's laughter died. What? Aunt Ava's voice cut through the silence. What firecrackers? Just a little surprise, Nathan muttered. To celebrate the baby. Lucas thought it was funny. He could have died then. The words exploded from me. He almost did. But you just kept pushing, didn't you? Every prank, every surprise, pushing and pushing until. Now wait just a minute, Richard stood, face red. You can't possibly be suggesting. Your traditions killed my husband. Each word fell like a hammer. Your jokes, your pranks, your constant need to hurt people for fun, it all led to this. To him being distracted, paranoid, always looking over his shoulder for the next attack from his own family. Evelyn swayed to her feet. How dare you? We loved Lucas. You loved having a victim. I turned to the gathered mourners, to the faces I recognized from years of family gatherings. Did you know they put laxatives in Caroline's coffee when she was pregnant? That she lost the baby? Did you know they filled Lucas's car with fireworks last month? Did you laugh then? Are you laughing now? The silence was absolute. Even Nathan looked sick. Mama? Sophia's voice, barely a whisper, broke something inside me. Can we go home? I gathered her close, feeling my unborn child kick against her as we embraced. Yes, baby. We're leaving. I looked at the Bennetts one last time. And we're never coming back. You can't keep us from our grandchildren, Evelyn called after us. We have rights. I turned at the door, one hand on my belly, the other holding Sophia. Try to come near us, and I'll show you what real revenge looks like. Because unlike you, I don't think causing pain is funny. Outside, Aunt Ava waited by her car. I'll drive you home. No. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling a cab. And then I'm calling my lawyer. Isla. They need to pay, Ava. Not just for Lucas. For everyone they've hurt. For every joke that left scars. I met her eyes. Will you help me? She glanced back at the chapel, where Nathan was now arguing with Richard, where Caroline sat crying. Where Evelyn knocked back another drink from her flask. Yes, she said finally. It's time someone stopped them. As we waited for the cab, I felt Lucas's absence like a physical wound. But beneath the grief, something else grew alongside our child, a determination that would reshape the Bennett family forever. They wanted to play games? Fine. But this time, I'd make the rules. 5 years passed like a held breath. Lucas Jr., we called him LJ, grew into his father's smile and my stubbornness. Sophia turned 13, all sharp edges and quiet strength. And the Bennetts? They waited, like vultures circling a wounded animal. The Christmas card arrived on a Tuesday. Sophia brought it in with the mail, her hands trembling. They want us to come for Christmas, Mom. I almost said no. Should have said no. But LJ looked up from his toys, eyes bright with curiosity about the family we never discussed, and something inside me cracked. Maybe it's time, Aunt Ava said over the phone that night. They've changed, Isla. The therapy, the medications. Evelyn's on anxiety meds. That doesn't erase what they did. No, but they're trying. Nathan hasn't pulled a prank in years. Caroline's pregnant again. My fingers found the scar on my palm, from the joke gift they'd sent after Lucas died, a music box that shattered when opened. One chance, I said finally. Christmas morning only. We leave at the first sign of trouble. The Bennett house looked smaller than I remembered. Sophia gripped my hand as we approached, LJ balanced on my hip. He looked so much like Lucas it hurt. Welcome home. Evelyn's smile seemed genuine, her hand steady as she reached for LJ. I stepped back. No touching without permission. That was the agreement. Richard appeared behind her, gray-haired and subdued. Of course. We understand. The morning started well enough. Normal presents, normal breakfast. Nathan and Caroline sat across from us, their own toddler throwing Cheerios. No exploding packages, no hidden cameras, no cruel surprises. Then LJ opened the last gift. The Jack-in-the-Box was identical to the one that had triggered Caroline's miscarriage years ago. Before I could stop him, LJ turned the crank. No! Caroline screamed, but it was too late. The clown burst forth, spraying something that smelled like rotten eggs. LJ fell backward, crying. Sophia knocked the toy away, but the damage was done. It was just meant to be funny, Nathan said quickly. A little stink bomb, that's all. Funny? I lifted LJ, checking him for injuries. You think traumatizing children is funny? Oh, lighten up, Evelyn snapped, mask finally slipping. This is why Lucas always defended us. He understood family traditions. Lucas is dead. The words echoed off expensive wallpaper. Dead because of your traditions, your pranks, your stupid need to hurt people for entertainment. Now wait just a minute, Richard started, but I was already moving. Sophia, get our coats. We're leaving. But the presents, LJ whimpered. Leave them. I turned to the Bennetts, fury burning away 5 years of careful healing. You want gifts? Here's yours. I pulled out my phone, opened the video I'd been recording since we arrived. Every conversation. Every joke. Every admission of past pranks. All recorded. All about to go viral unless you agree to my terms. You wouldn't dare, Nathan growled. Try me. One post about Caroline's miscarriage, about Lucas's accident, about today, how long before your business partners see it? Your friends? Your church? Caroline touched her pregnant belly protectively. Isla, please. Sign over Lucas's trust fund to LJ. All of it. And sign a legal agreement never to contact us again. That's blackmail, Richard sputtered. No, that's consequences. Something you've avoided your whole lives. I headed for the door, children in tow. You have until New Year's to decide. You're just like us now, Evelyn called after me. Using pain for power. Lucas would be ashamed. I paused, remembering Lucas's last morning, how he'd kissed me goodbye, promised to talk to them one last time about changing. How he never came home. Maybe I am becoming like you, I said quietly. But at least I'm honest about my cruelty. Outside, snow fell like ash. Sophia helped LJ into the car while I stood watching the house where Lucas grew up, where he learned that love and pain were interchangeable. Mom? Sophia's voice was small. Are we really going to post that video? I looked at my children, Lucas's children, and felt the weight of choices stretching out before us. That depends on them. And on whether revenge tastes as sweet as they always claimed it did. The drive home was silent except for LJ's quiet sobs. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with messages from the Bennetts, but I didn't check them. Let them worry. Let them fear. Let them finally understand how it feels to be on the other side of their games. Sometimes the only way to end a tradition is to break it completely. The video went viral faster than a California wildfire. 3 million views in 24 hours. Comment sections exploding with outrage. Local news stations calling. The Bennett family's carefully constructed facade crumbled with each share, each angry reaction, each exposed truth. I watched it burn from behind my screen, LJ asleep in my lap, while Sophia did homework at the kitchen table. Mom? She looked up from her textbook. Aunt Caroline's trying to video call. My finger hovered over the accept button. Caroline's face appeared, tear-streaked and hollow. They're destroying everything, she whispered. Nathan's business partners are pulling out. The church asked Mom and Dad to step down from the board. Everyone knows. That was the point. Please, take it down. We'll sign whatever you want. Too late. I shifted LJ gently. The truth doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to everyone you've ever hurt. The doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw them all, Evelyn, Richard, Nathan, even Aunt Ava. Standing in the snow like supplicants at a temple. Don't answer it, Caroline pleaded. Nathan's. He's not himself. I ended the call. Sophia, take LJ upstairs. Lock the door. Don't come down unless I call you. The doorbell rang again, more insistent. I opened it, keeping the security chain latched. Come to plant more bombs? Hide more cameras? We came to apologize, Evelyn said, but Nathan shoved past her. You vindictive bitch. His face was red, spittle flying. You've ruined us. No, you ruined yourselves. I just showed everyone the truth. The truth? He slammed his fist against the door. The truth is Lucas loved our traditions. He understood family. The truth is Lucas was terrified of you. The words exploded from me. He checked his car every morning for pranks. Tested his food before eating. Jumped at loud noises. You didn't love him, you tortured him. That's not Richard started, but Aunt Ava cut him off. Yes, it is. She stepped forward. We all saw it. We just pretended not to. Shut up, Ava, Evelyn snapped. You were always too soft. And you were always too cruel. Ava pulled out her phone. Which is why I saved every text, every email, every video of your pranks for the past 20 years. Including the ones about Lucas's accident. Nathan went pale. What are you talking about? The text you sent your mother the morning Lucas died. About the surprise you planned for his car. The one you deleted after you heard about the crash. The porch fell silent except for the wind. Even Nathan stopped breathing. I didn't. He whispered. I never meant. None of us meant it, Ava said quietly. But we let it happen. All of it. And now we pay the price. I looked at them, really looked. At Evelyn's trembling hands, Richard's stooped shoulders, Nathan's broken expression. At the family that had terrorized so many people in the name of tradition, now destroyed by their own legacy. The trust fund papers, I said finally. Do you have them? Richard pulled out an envelope. Signed and notarized. Everything goes to LJ. And the restraining order? That too. Evelyn's voice cracked. But please, let us at least send cards on their birthdays. No. I took the envelope. You don't get to hurt them anymore. Not ever again. Then why did you really post that video? Nathan asked. If not for negotiations? I thought of Lucas, of his last morning, of all the mornings he spent checking for traps and pranks. Of the fear that lived in him until the day he died. Because somewhere out there, another family thinks cruelty is funny. Another child is learning that love means pain. Maybe now they'll think twice. We could change, Evelyn whispered. Then change. But do it far away from us. I closed the door on their protests, their pleas, their too-late apologies. Upstairs, I heard LJ laughing at something Sophia said, the sound pure and unburdened by fear. My phone buzzed with another news request, another chance to tell our story. But as I looked at the papers in my hands, just as served cold and clean, I realized I was done with the Bennett's story. It was time to write our own. The package arrived on Lucas's birthday. No return address, just a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside, I found an old leather journal and a letter from Aunt Ava. Found this while cleaning out the attic. It was Lucas's. You should have it. Sophia helped LJ with his homework while I sat at the kitchen table, running my fingers over the worn cover. The last page held an entry dated 3 days before the accident. Sometimes I wonder if they can change. If anyone can. Mom says pranks are how we show love, but all I see is fear. In Isla's eyes when she checks her food. In Caroline's when Nathan enters a room. In Sophia's when she visits her grandparents. I'm going to end it tomorrow. Tell them either they get help or they lose us. Maybe they'll finally understand that real love doesn't leave scars. My hands shook as I turned back through the pages, finding years of documented pranks, accidents, near misses. Lucas had been building a case, gathering evidence, preparing to do exactly what I'd done with that viral video. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Caroline standing on the porch, heavily pregnant, holding something. 5 minutes, I said through the door. That's all you get. She held out a tablet. Nathan's in therapy. Real therapy, not just the court-ordered kind. He wanted you to see this. The video showed Nathan in a sterile office, tears streaming down his face. I killed my brother, he said to someone off-screen. Not directly, but I killed him all the same. With every prank, every scare, every time I made him feel unsafe in his own life. And I can't take it back. I can't fix it. But I can change. I have to change. Why show me this? Caroline touched her belly. Because I'm having a girl. And I need to know if there's ever a chance. If we prove we're different. That's not my decision anymore. I handed back the tablet. It's theirs. I gestured to where Sophia and LJ watched from the window. They'd grown so much, Sophia nearly as tall as me now, LJ with Lucas's quiet strength in his eyes. But if you want a chance, I added, start with the truth. Show them the journal. Let them see who their father really was, and what he died trying to change. And Mom and Dad? They made their choices. Every day, for years, they chose cruelty over kindness. Now they live with those choices. Caroline nodded, then pulled out one last item, a sealed envelope. Lucas wrote this the week before. Before everything. Made me promise to give it to you if anything ever happened to him. I was too ashamed until now. Inside, I found a single page. My love. If you're reading this, I failed. Failed to protect you from my family, failed to change them, maybe failed to come home to you. But please know this, you showed me what real love looks like. Not the twisted version I grew up with, but something pure and strong and kind. Whatever happens, don't let them dim that light in you. Don't let revenge poison what makes you beautiful. Show our children that breaking cycles takes more courage than continuing them. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't fix this. L. Caroline left quietly while I read. When I looked up, Sophia and LJ stood beside me. Can we read it? Sophia asked. Yes. I handed them the letter, watching their faces as they absorbed their father's last words. Dad was brave, LJ said finally. Yes, he was. I pulled them close, breathing in the scent of homework and hope and healing. And so are we. Later, I added my own entry to Lucas's journal. You didn't fail, my love. You planted the seeds of change. And though you didn't live to see it bloom, our children will grow up knowing that real love leaves no scars, only wings. The cycle ends with us. I closed the journal, leaving space for whatever stories our future might hold. Some pages, after all, are better left blank than filled with false laughter and hidden pain. Outside, spring rain washed away the last traces of winter, and somewhere, a family tradition died so that something better could grow in its place.